Okay, so get this. We're diving into something Donald Trump said, and it's got everybody talking.
Oh, yeah.
It's all over this YouTube video
What's
called,
it called?
it's called Trump Issues Bombshell Legal Threat.
Okay.
And in the video, there are these two legal analysts, Brian Teller Cohen and Glenn Kirshner, and they're breaking down one of Trump's social media posts.
All right.
He actually calls it a cease and desist.
A cease and desist.
Yeah, but he's basically aiming it at anyone he thinks might challenge him in the 2024 election.
Like, whoa.
I mean, we're talking lawyers, people working on campaigns, people donating to campaigns, even election officials.
Wow. So
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy that voting's barely started and he's already saying the election's being stolen from them.
I know, right? It's like he's pulling out the same playbook from 2020, all
Yeah.
this talk about cheating and skullduggery, and he's even promising to prosecute anyone he thinks cheated if he wins. So I guess the question is this just Trump being Trump, all talk? Or is there actually something more to worry about here?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you see, a typical cease and desist letter is a legal thing.
Okay.
Like an actual document, often used for things like copyright infringement and stuff.
Oh, right.
It's basically a formal warning that's like legally serious.
So is Trump really trying to sue all these people?
Well, Kirshner says that even though Trump calls it a cease and desist, his post doesn't actually have any legal standing.
So it's not a real cease and desist?
Not really, no.
Huh.
It doesn't have that like official process or weight that a real cease and desist would have.
Mm.
Kirshner even pointed out that it's kind of ironic that Trump's using what he calls a third-rate social media platform to make these claims.
It's like he's trying to scare people away from even participating in the election, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
That's what they call a chilling effect.
Chilling effect.
It's when people basically censor themselves or hold back from doing something.
Because they're scared.
Right, because they're afraid of the consequences, even if there's no legal basis for those consequences.
So someone might, I don't know, think twice about donating to a campaign or volunteering because they don't want to get on Trump's bad side.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Okay.
And, we might already be seeing this happening.
Really?
The Washington Post and the LA Times, both really influential papers historically, they refuse to endorse a candidate in this election.
Wow. Is that unusual?
Yeah, it's pretty unprecedented.
Huh.
And some people think they're doing it to avoid, like, making Trump angry,
Yeah.
in case he wins.
That's a big deal.
Definitely.
And didn't Trump specifically include political operatives in his list of targets?
He did.
I mean, that seems pretty broad, right? Like, who does that even include?
Oh, it's super broad. Like, basically anyone involved in politics could be considered a political operative.
So, like, analysts.
Yeah, totally. Even analysts like Teller Cohen and Kirshner.
Really? So it sounds like it's not really about legal danger, but more about this feeling of intimidation, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Kirshner actually makes a distinction between legal and illegal exposure, as he calls it.
Okay.
He says, like, legally, there might not be much ground for Trump's threats,
Okay.
but he could still act illegally, especially if he wins and has all the power of the presidency backing him up.
Right.
And that's what's really concerning.
So what's he worried Trump might do?
Well, he's worried Trump might use the power of being president to go after anyone he sees as an opponent,
Hmm.
even if there's no legal reason to do so.
But wouldn't there be something to stop him from doing that? Checks and balances or whatever?
Well, that's where Kirshner gets really worried.
How so?
He points to the Supreme Court, how it's made up right now, and some of its recent decisions,
Like what?
like that ruling on absolute immunity for the president.
Can you remind me what that means?
Sure, so it basically means the president can't be sued for things they do as president, even if those things are illegal.
Wait, so a president could break the law and not face any consequences?
Well, that's what Kirshner's worried about.
Yeah.
He's worried that ruling, combined with Trump's, blatant disregard for norms, could create a situation where Trump feels like he can do whatever he wants and get away with it.
So even if this cease and desist isn't legally binding, it's still a big deal because it shows how he might abuse his power, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Wow, that's starting to feel a little ominous.
Yeah.
And then Kirshner says something that's even more chilling.
What's that?
He says this 2024 election is the most important of our lifetime.
He's not kidding around, is he?
Nope.
But why does he think it's such a turning point?
Well, he thinks if Trump wins, things could get really bad. Like we could see basic democratic norms completely disappear, even a shift toward authoritarianism. So it's bigger than just who wins. It's about what kind of country we're going to be. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this cease and desist and what it could all mean.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel the pressure of this election.
Me too.
Well, everyone get ready because we're going to take an even closer look at how this could actually affect the election itself in our next part.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll be right back. It's scary to think this goes way beyond just, legal stuff.
So you're saying it's more about the whole vibe Trump is creating?
Exactly. Like, imagine if people are too scared to say what they think or even participate because they think Trump will retaliate.
Right.
I mean, that just destroys democracy.
And we've already seen it happening, like those newspapers refusing to endorse anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
They're probably just trying to stay off Trump's radar.
Right. And if these powerful institutions are already caving, think about how regular people feel.
Yeah, like people who just want to volunteer for a campaign or donate or even just share their opinion online.
Exactly. It's like they're being silenced before they even get a chance to speak.
So that's what that chilling effect means.
Yep. It basically chokes off any real debate, stops people from sharing ideas, and in the end, it weakens our whole democracy.
Man, this feels way bigger than just one election. Like, it's affecting how we even talk about politics in this country.
You're absolutely right, and what's happening now could have consequences for years to come.
So what can we even do? If this cease and desist isn't even a real legal threat, does that mean we're powerless?
No, not at all.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, even though there might not be much we can do legally, there are other ways to push back against this kind of stuff.
Okay, like what? Give me some hope here.
Well, first off, we got to call it what it is.
Yeah, what is it?
It's an attempt to bully people into silence,
Yeah.
to shut down any opposition.
Right.
We need to shine a light on it, make people aware of what's happening, and make it clear that this kind of behavior just isn't acceptable in a democracy.
So basically, don't let him get away with it.
Exactly. The more people understand what he's trying to do, the less power it has.
And hopefully that'll give more people the courage to speak up and not be silenced.
Absolutely. Defending our democratic values is super important right now. The more people participate and speak their minds, the harder it is for anyone to control the narrative.
It's a good reminder that we can't just sit back and watch. Democracy needs us to be active.
Right. But this also feels like it needs action from those in power, right? Those institutions that are supposed to protect our system.
Yeah, like what needs to happen there?
Those institutions, especially the ones responsible for upholding the law and making sure elections are fair, they need to stay strong and independent.
Good.
They have to act as a check on anyone who tries to abuse their power.
So we need a strong justice system, a free press, and ethical leaders in every branch of government.
Exactly. Those are the foundations of a healthy democracy, and we need to protect them fiercely.
The stakes are higher than ever, aren't they?
They really are.
The choices we make in this election and in the years after will have a massive impact on the future of American democracy. We need to be informed, engaged, and ready to stand up for what we believe in.
Couldn't agree more. This isn't just about politics. It's about what kind of society we want to live in and what we leave behind for future generations.
This whole thing has really made me realize how fragile our system is and how important it is to actively defend it.
It's true.
But I gotta ask, what if Trump actually wins? What happens then?
That's the question that keeps a lot of people up at night, and it's definitely something we need to think about seriously.
Because then he'd have even more power to act on those threats, right?
Exactly. And as we talked about before, the way the law is right now, especially with those rulings on presidential immunity, it might be really tough to hold him accountable.
So is there anything we can do to prevent that or at least minimize the damage?
That's where the power of the people comes in.
Okay, what do you mean?
We need citizens who are engaged, who actively participate in the political process, who hold their elected officials accountable, and who stand up for democratic values. That's our best defense.
So it all comes down to us, our choices, our actions, and our commitment to democracy.
Exactly. The future of American democracy isn't set in stone. It's something we actively shape through our involvement and participation.
Okay, we've talked about the legal and political dangers, but there's another side to this. I want to look at the ethical side.
Good point. It's crucial to think about the ethical implications, especially when it comes to how much we trust our elections.
So it's not just about what he can legally do, but about how his words are affecting the whole system.
Exactly. By constantly saying the election is rigged even before any votes are cast, he's undermining the very idea of democracy itself.
And if people lose trust in the system, that can have consequences for a long time, right?
Right. It makes it even harder to deal with problems in the future.
So what can we do to fight back against that?
It starts with recommitting to truth, fairness, and the basic principles of democracy.
Okay.
We need to be critical thinkers, fact-check what we see and hear, and hold those who spread lies accountable.
So being informed, discerning, and promoting truth and accuracy.
Exactly. And having real constructive conversations, even with people who disagree with us, is super important.
That sounds really hard right now. Everything feels so divided. How can we even have productive conversation?
I know it's tough, but it's essential.
Okay.
We need to listen to each other, try to understand where others are coming from, and find some common ground.
So building bridges and rebuilding trust, one conversation at a time.
Exactly. And that takes empathy, respect, and a willingness to engage in good faith.
It's a lot to ask, but it feels like it's necessary if we want to protect our democracy.
I agree. This whole situation just highlights how fragile democracy really is and how much effort it takes to maintain it.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot. The legal dangers, the political dangers, the ethical implications, and how it affects our society as a whole. But before we wrap this part up, I want to look at things from a global perspective.
Yeah, good point. This isn't just an American issue. What happens to American democracy affects the whole world.
So what message does this send to other countries, especially those trying to build their own democracies or keep the ones they have?
It's a pretty worrisome message.
How so?
When a major democracy like the U.S. seems to be failing, it gives power to authoritarian leaders and weakens the global push for democracy.
Like we're setting a bad example, showing it's okay to ignore democratic rules.
Exactly. And that can have serious consequences for human rights, freedom, and stability all over the world.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to how much is riding on this election. It's not just about American politics, it's about the future of democracy worldwide.
You got it. And it's a stark reminder that we can't just sit back and relax. We need to be active in defending democratic values, both here and around the world.
Okay, we've explored the legal, the political, the ethical, and the global sides of this whole mess.
We have.
But there's one more crucial thing I want to touch on. The psychological impact of all this.
Yeah, that's important. We got to acknowledge how this kind of rhetoric can mess with people's emotions.
What do you mean by that?
Well, imagine being constantly bombarded with messages of fear, division, and distrust that can really get to you, create anxiety, stress, and make you feel hopeless.
So it's not just about the political stuff, but about how it affects our mental and emotional health.
Exactly. And that's why self-care is so important, as well as connecting with supportive people and seeking professional help if you need it.
So taking care of ourselves, supporting each other, and getting help when we need it, those are all part of protecting democracy too.
Absolutely. We can't fight for a better future if we're not taking care of ourselves and each other.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, me too.
It's shown me that the fight for democracy is complicated, and it needs us to approach it from all angles. The legal, the political, the ethical, the global, and even the psychological.
It's a fight worth having, though, and every single one of us has a role to play.
Okay, before we get to our final thoughts on this whole situation, I think we need to take a step back and look at this from a historical perspective.
Good idea. Understanding the historical context is key.
Like, how does what's happening now compare to other times in American history when things were politically chaotic or democracy was threatened?
Right.
Are there any similarities we can draw on to help us make sense of what's going on now?
Definitely. There are definitely echoes of past eras when things were really polarized, society was restless, and democratic norms were challenged.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, what eras are we talking about?
well, think about the time leading up to the Civil War, the Red Scare in the 1950s, even Watergate in the 1970s. Those were all times when American democracy was put to the test.
And what can we learn from those times? Are there any lessons that apply to what's happening today?
They remind us that democracy isn't something that just stays the same or something we can take for granted.
Right.
We always have to be vigilant, we have to be committed to the rule of law, and we have to be willing to defend our principles against those who try to undermine them.
So history can be both a warning and a guide.
Exactly. By understanding what happened in the past, we can better see the dangers we face now and come up with ways to protect democracy for the future.
This deep dive has really been a journey. It's complex and challenging, but I feel like we've learned some valuable things along the way.
I agree. And remember, this is an ongoing conversation. We need to keep talking about these things, exploring different viewpoints, and working together to find solutions.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is a good place to pause for now.
Okay.
We've explored all the layers of this cease and desist thing, from the legal and political aspects to the ethical, global, psychological, and even historical dimensions.
We have, and we've highlighted how important it is for citizens to be active, think critically, and be committed to democratic values.
Right, but there's still one big question hanging over all of this. What happens next for American democracy?
And that's exactly what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. Stay with us, listeners. We've got more to uncover as we navigate these uncharted waters.
Okay, so we've gone through the legal stuff and the ethics and even how this all plays out globally and affects people personally.
Yeah,
It really feels like American democracy is at a crossroads.
it is. Like, the question is, where do we even go from here?
Exactly. What happens next? Is it all downhill from here, or can things actually get better?
Well, there are a few things that could happen, and honestly, none of them are easy or guaranteed.
Okay.
Like, one possibility is that things just keep getting worse, more divided, more backsliding, no matter who wins the election.
So even if Trump loses, the damage is already done. We can't just go back to normal.
It's not that simple.
Right.
The things that have protected our democracy, the norms and institutions, they've been weakened. And it takes time to rebuild that trust, to reinforce those safeguards, and it takes commitment from everyone.
That's pretty discouraging.
Yeah.
But is there any chance this could actually be a good thing in the end? Like a wake-up call?
There's always hope.
This could be the thing that gets people fired up, that makes them recommit to democratic values and push to make our system stronger.
So like a course correction where we actually learn from this and come out stronger on the other side.
Exactly. But it takes everyone working together. Citizens, leaders, institutions, everybody needs to step up and say that democracy matters, hold those who break the rules accountable, and try to talk about politics in a more civil and productive way.
That sounds really hard, especially with how divided things are right now. Do you really think that's possible?
It's tough, for sure, but not impossible.
Okay.
History shows us that democracies can be pretty resilient.
Hmm.
They can adapt and change and overcome some pretty big obstacles.
Like that saying, the only constant is change.
Exactly. But the way things change depends on us.
Right.
Giving up and feeling hopeless won't get us anywhere.
Yeah.
We need to hold on to hope and believe that what we do can actually make a difference.
Okay, I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's hard not to feel overwhelmed. What can we as individuals actually do to make a difference in all this?
There's actually a lot we can do.
Really?
Yeah, first, we got to stay informed, learn about the issues, and talk to people about them, even those who disagree with us, but do it respectfully.
Okay.
Support organizations that are working to strengthen democracy, and of course, the most important thing, vote.
So knowledge is power, and we need to use our voices and our votes to create the future we want.
You got it. And we can also lead by example, be civil, be empathetic, and be committed to truth in our own lives.
It's about taking back our power as citizens and being involved in shaping our democracy's future.
That's a great way to put it. The fate of American democracy isn't set in stone. It's something we actively create through the choices we make and the things we do.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. We started with this cease and desist letter and ended up talking about the very core of American democracy.
All right?
And while the future is uncertain, one thing is clear. What we do today, both individually and as a society, will determine the future of our nation.
It's a lot to take in, and I know some listeners might be feeling anxious or even scared right now.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It's important to remember you're not alone in this.
Right.
We find strength in community by connecting with others who share our values and concerns.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out for support, whether it's from friends, family, or professionals.
So taking care of ourselves and each other is also a way to protect democracy.
Absolutely. We can't fight for a better future if we're not taking care of ourselves and each other.
Well said. This deep dive has been a reality check, but it's also been empowering. It reminds us that the future of American democracy isn't set in stone. We have the power to shape it through our choices and actions.
And as we move forward, it's important to remember what Frederick Douglass said. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. The challenges we face may seem huge, but they're not impossible to overcome. By holding on to the principles of democracy, talking to each other in a constructive way, and working together to create a more just and equal society, we can make sure that American democracy continues to thrive for generations to come.
That's a powerful and hopeful message to end on. Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive.
You're welcome.
We hope it's inspired you to think critically, get involved, and be part of the conversation about the future of our democracy.
And remember, the future isn't something that just happens to us, it's something we create together.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.